Welcome to episode 3 of the Soccer Fitness Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be speaking about strength training and why adding strength training to any player's training schedule will make them a better footballer. So I've got a few key points that I want to go through. I'm not going to be scripted, but I have made a few points on a piece of paper here that I might refer to as we go, just to keep me on track. So the first thing I just want to cover is when I speak to parents of youth footballers, quite a common concern is that introducing strength training might make the player become bulky, which will then affect their speed. And I think this belief comes from when players become sort of teenagers, 16, 17, 18, and they start going off and trying to do their own gym-based work. Commonly what I can hear is that they're essentially following like a bodybuilding based training plan, which isn't football specific. And doing that over a prolonged period of time can lead to obviously muscle hypertrophy, which is an increase in muscle size. And because we're not training specifically for football, then just that additional bulk is starting to affect a player's speed. But if we do things properly, it's really going to be difficult to hit upon that, because that's not what we're aiming for. There needs to be specific things in place to be able to trigger that adaptation in the first place, which we're not going to be hitting in the season. And also there's only a certain period during the season, the off season, when we're actually able to train in that way to trigger muscle hypertrophy. And it's not a bad thing at all. It is actually a good thing. We need to make sure though, if we're increasing muscle size, we're also increasing muscle strength and then our explosiveness at the same time. And I'll just explain why this is actually quite hard to achieve during the season and why it shouldn't really be a concern when you're following a properly structured program. I'm then going to obviously go through the other benefits of strength training as well to football performance. So the first thing to mention in terms of muscle hypertrophy is that there needs to be a few things in place to be able to really trigger that adaptation. So obviously first thing, we can't just do it for 1 or 2 sessions and expect to increase muscle size. It needs to be done in high volume over a prolonged period of time to really notice a significant change. And that adaptation really taking place in terms of the muscle size getting bigger. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that what we need first is some level of tension on the muscle. We're obviously going to be getting that from all different types of strength training. So I can understand why it might come from that belief. If we're doing strength training and we're going to need that tension on the muscle to trigger muscle hypertrophy, they might think, well, that alone is going to trigger it, but actually we need some other things, other conditions to be met as well. So muscle tension, what that will do is then that will send a signal to then trigger protein synthesis. So protein synthesis is when the muscle rebuilds, and it will rebuild stronger in response to adaptation of needing to be stronger from lifting additional load or doing movements which the muscles are finding stressful, and the muscles then learn that they need to become stronger. So if we meet those conditions, then if the muscle breaks down, it can repair stronger. So the first thing we need obviously is the muscle tension, but the muscle tension isn't enough. So we must have some other things alongside that to trigger the muscle hypertrophy adaptation. The next thing we need is a high level of metabolic stress. So we need to be working really to failure, and the muscle is going to be continue to repeat reps when it's already highly fatigued, and that's going to trigger that adaptation in terms of creating that environment where we've got the metabolic stress being created alongside the muscle tension. And during the season, when we're doing strength training as a footballer in a football specific way, we shouldn't be and we don't need to be hitting failure with our strength training exercises. I normally push players to around an 8 out of 10 in terms of how close to failure they feel that they are. We're never going to be working a player to failure, because to increase levels of strength, we don't need to be doing that. And also because we need to be mindful of the training load and not triggering muscle soreness, which could limit how they perform in a training session in the next couple of days or a match as well. So we're not going to be working a player to failure, but we are providing the mechanical tension that we need, but we're not going to be working a player to failure and fatigue. And that's straight away one thing which is going to be missing, which is required for muscle hypertrophy, for that adaptation to come about. The next thing that we need is muscle damage as well. So that will come about firstly from obviously working the muscles really hard using medium to high loads in terms of the weight that a player is using and a high volume as well. So during the season as a footballer, we're going to also be limiting the volume of sets and reps that we're doing, or overall sets and overall reps that we're doing from our strength-based training. So we're not going to hit the volume which is required to, again, push the body into that overload which is required for the muscle hypertrophy to occur. The other thing with the type of training is that if we're training for muscle hypertrophy, we're looking to create those micro tears in the muscle, which will create that muscle damage, and then we've got that signal for the mechanical tension, which is triggering the protein synthesis, and then there's that environment there where we've got the high level of fatigue, so we've got that metabolic stress, we've got the mechanical tension, and we've also got the muscle tears, and the body is going to repair those tears back stronger, and it's going to increase the muscle size as well. So we're going to be missing that because we're not going to be training in a way where we're looking to create that level of fatigue and stress where we start to get those micro tears, and commonly that is achieved as well through eccentric based exercises where we're loading the muscle when it is lengthening. And again, that's another thing that we need to be mindful of during the season as a footballer, because that's going to create quite a high level of soreness. Training eccentrically with high loads consistently is going to make a player quite sore, and then that's going to hinder, limit, decrease their level of how fresh they feel in training and matches throughout the week, and also their power output as well as they're recovering. So there's a few key things there. Alongside that, what we need to with hypertrophy based training is a decent amount of recovery time between each session. And not only are we not going to be training in a way which is triggering that adaptation optimally in the first place, but a player commonly has sessions every day, not gym sessions every day, not strength training every day, but they might have, say, a strength-based session on a Tuesday, and then next day they're training again with their team, and then we might have an upper body focus session on a Wednesday, and again they're doing other things with their team around that. We're not doing like lower body twice per week or in enough volume with enough recovery time between each of those sessions with the right stimulus provided in those sessions anyway to trigger that adaptation of muscle hypertrophy if we're going to try and do that, like if our sole aim is going for that, then we're just not going to be doing that as a footballer during the season. In the off season, there are benefits to doing that. I'll cover them quickly now. One is that obviously if we have a bigger muscle, then a bigger muscle can then be conditioned to become a stronger muscle, so we're increasing our strength levels, and then a stronger muscle can then be conditioned to be explosive, which is then going to lead on to our level of explosiveness increasing as well. So the strength is underpinning that, and there's only a certain limit of strength that a muscle of a certain size can reach. To keep increasing levels of strength, we need to increase the muscle size further, which will then allow us to increase our strength levels further, which will then allow us to increase our level of explosiveness, because it's underpinning that explosiveness and that power. But the last thing I just wanted to cover in terms of that is also the nutrition side as well. So for muscle hypertrophy, to support all of those training, that training environment that we would create to trigger that adaptation of muscle hypertrophy, we also need to be in a calorie surplus as well. So that is eating over the amount of calories that we would normally eat just to maintain where we're currently at. So the body has then got that energy and those macronutrients available to be able to recover and repair and build that new muscle. Commonly, footballers, especially youth footballers, have a very high metabolism. They are training multiple times per week, so they're already their calorie output, the amount of calories that they're burning each day is high anyway, alongside their high metabolism. And also at the same time, because they're playing quite a lot, they might not have a great appetite, so they're finding it a challenge to get enough calories in the first place. Alongside that, a lot of youth players actually don't even realise how many calories they need to be eating day to day just to maintain the level that they're currently at in terms of the portion sizes and the overall amount each day as well. So when all those things come into play, it's going to be very difficult to actually create a situation where a player is going to be adding a lot of muscle mass during the season, and it's going to get to any sort of level or point where they're seeing it's going to slow them down on the pitch. So I just wanted to cover that there in terms of overcoming that belief and just explaining why it's going to be really hard to create that situation during the season. And there are actually times where it is beneficial to do that in the right way in the off season as well. So that's the first one I just wanted to cover. So in terms of the actual benefits of strength training, obviously the most obvious one probably is a player can become stronger and more stable on the ball. So when a player is stronger, especially throughout their core and the lower body, but also the upper body as well, because that will help with shielding the ball and holding off opponents. If they're stronger, they're going to be able to withstand challenges that are coming in, hold their ground, and not be pushed off the ball, and be stronger in challenges as well. So our strength training can achieve that, and it doesn't have to be hypertrophy-based training. We can do other strength-based training during the season, which is going to enable a player to become stronger. So that's quite a quick point to cover in relation to the first one that I covered there. The next one, that I just want to cover is injury resilience. So outside of actually directly increasing a player's strength levels in terms of the effect that it has on their performance on the pitch, if we can increase a player's level of injury resilience from the off, we're at a huge advantage, because they can then stay on the pitch for as long as possible, and they can continue to build form week after week and reduce their chance of having injury setbacks, which means that everything that they're doing in terms of their technical training, their training of the team, the benefits in their fitness and the form that they're getting from their matches, and any strength and conditioning training that they're doing as well, if they can just stay on the pitch for longer, that's all going to compound over time. So that could just be one benefit straight away of strength training, is that increased tolerance for overcoming situations where a common football injury might come about, and that would be through strengthening tendons, muscles, ligaments. And if you can increase the tolerance of those tissues, then what might have been a situation or an amount of force which caused an injury in the past, now that they're stronger through strength training, it might just be that scenario in a match where an injury could have occurred, but because you've got that extra layer of resilience, then the injury actually didn't occur, and you're able to then, whereas you might have been out for a few weeks or a few months, all of a sudden you're not injured at all, and you're able to continue training and continue playing week on week. So you've got that increased tolerance and also stronger tissues as well. So really what we want to be doing is, through strength training, is getting the muscles to a point where they can handle force to such a level that it's actually greater than what the player will be experiencing out on the football pitch, so that when they're already prepared for when there might be in a situation where the body is in an uncomfortable position or an awkward position, and it could potentially create an injury, or there's a high risk of injury in that situation, but the body has already been trained and is conditioned and is adapted to actually be able to handle a higher level of force than that position is putting the body under on the pitch, if that makes sense. So the training is actually taking us to a higher level than we're going to experience on the pitch, and that's the same with actually just normal training anyway. A lot of coaches commonly say that the training should be harder than the match. So if we work extra hard in training, we make that the hard bit, then the match should actually be less stressful on the body and be easier. So that's just the next thing to cover there in terms of injury resilience and the benefits of strength training in terms of injury resilience. Next thing I want to cover is that strength is the foundation of power, like we've already sort of touched on in the first point there. So if I have a high level of strength, I then can condition that strength to be explosive. So my rate that I can apply that force into the ground and into my movements is going to enable me to become more explosive. And it's that whole underlying foundation of every powerful movement that a player is performing on the pitch. So if you think about even performing a skill, a step over, for example, the speed of that limb movement is going to come about first of all from the strength that you've got to be moving your leg in the first place, lifting it and then moving it, but also the explosiveness to be able to apply force quickly as well. So that's going to increase the speed of that movement, just in that specific example of a step over. But then all the other movements that we've got as well, strength is the underlying foundation for the power in all of those. And it's not about size. So we can have a player who remains the same size in terms of their muscle mass, but still become stronger. And because they've become stronger, they're able to become more explosive and powerful through the training that they're doing in the gym. Okay, so just touching on that in terms of we're building that foundation of strength, which is underpinning the power and all the movements that we want to perform explosively out on the pitch. Okay, so the next one is utilization of the muscle fibers, obviously, that we've already got, and increasing muscle activation. So through strength training, when we're moving out on the pitch and performing all these different movements, at any one time, our body isn't going to be, or our muscles, not every single fiber within the muscles is going to be getting recruited, which means that we've already got high levels of strength within us, which just aren't being tapped into because the levels of muscle activation aren't where they potentially could be. And we can increase those levels of muscle activation, so get more muscle fibers activated to be helping with each movement through strength training. Okay, so by doing that, increasing muscle activation, increasing the coordination, so that certain muscles are switched on to be used to support certain movements, and then we've got a higher percentage of those muscle fibers being used to support those movements as well. Not only is it going to enable us to become more powerful, we can see gains quite quickly from that type of training because we've already got that within us. We've already got those muscle fibers not being utilized. So it's just a case of increasing muscle activation through the strength training. But also if we've got any differences side to side in terms of activation levels within the muscles side to side, if you've got any imbalances, we can even those out as well. And that can help us move with more grace, more fluidity, and greater balance and greater efficiency as well. And when we increase that efficiency, I'll touch on this again in a few minutes, but that's also going to have a knock-on effect to our stamina levels as well, because all the forces that the player is absorbing out on the pitch, if we can increase the muscle activation, so the number of fibers which are being utilized to help with every movement, then that force is going to be spread across a higher number of muscle fibers, which is then going to reduce the level of overall fatigue that our muscles are feeling, and allow us to continue for longer and also recover more quickly between high intensity efforts such as repeated sprints or repeated efforts of going up for headers or repeated decelerations or accelerations. We can recover quicker, but also overall when we've even finished the match or finished training, it's going to improve our ability to recover as well, because we've not hit the same level of fatigue throughout our muscles. Okay, so that's the other benefit of strength training in terms of utilizing the fibers that we've already got and our activation levels as well. I've already touched on the better muscle recruitment and coordination. So with recruitment, for example, previously if we haven't been doing any strength training, we might have been performing movements where certain muscle groups or muscles are overworking and other muscle groups aren't working in the way that they should be, so they might be not being activated to the level that they should be. So for example, one might be that when we're landing, then the knees might start to collapse in, so knee valgus, when the knees collapse in. But if we then make sure that when we land, our glutes are also engaged and switched on with that movement, specifically our glute medius, then that's they're going to be involved in that movement in supporting the landing and preventing those knees from dropping in, which could potentially reduce an injury, but also create more tension ready for us to then be able to explode off in another direction as well straight away, and help with our balance and our stability upon that landing as well. So just want to cover that in terms of the muscle recruitment and efficiency. In terms of stability, it's going to help our stability because we're going to be, especially if we train balance and stability alongside our strength training in the gym, that's going to improve our ability to remain stable, which is then going to help us evade challenges and remain balanced on the ball and not be pushed off the ball so easily. It's going to enable us our muscles and our muscle fibers to activate quickly to support certain movements where we might be sort of pushed off the ball, but we've got that balance, and that through our proprioception training as well, our body can quickly adjust to the environment and remain more stable, which again can help with increasing performance in a certain situation where you might need to hold off an opponent or maintain control of the ball when you're being pushed off balance. And also, even for example, if there aren't any opponents around you and you happen to be running along and your foot slips because the surface isn't perfect, or there's a bit of a hole in the pitch, then your body might be able to quickly adapt because there's high activation levels, because of that increased proprioception, and make just that split second adjustment which saves you from an injury. Or you might still get an injury because it's a dangerous or awkward position, but it's not to the extent that it might have been without that strength training in there. Also, in terms of the stability, if we look at striking the ball, specifically if we're doing a volley, but even just a normal strike of the ball from the ground, if you remove the ball from that sort of action and look at what's going on, there's one leg which is on the ground, the other leg is swinging in preparation for the strike with the ball. So the quality of that strike is going to be hugely affected by the stability through that single leg and the level of strength through that single leg as well to remain stable. So if it can't remain stable, then the body might start to fall to one side or not be able to maintain balance for the amount of time required to be able to then complete the strike and make that connection. So that is also going to affect the quality of the strike. Also, think about strength is going to determine the amount of force that we can produce as well. So if I've got high levels of strength and I can apply that strength at speed, I can then put that new level of strength behind the ball as well, which is going to increase my kicking power. But again, the single leg stability is important with that, because I'm going to have a higher level of force to put into the ball, but then I'm going to be able to get the connection and the precision through the direction that I connect with the ball, to be able to put that force into the ball and have a precise strike of the ball as well. So just wanted to sort of outline how that plays a part. Then by increasing strength levels through our core as well, that's going to increase the transfer of energy between our upper and lower body. So we're going to be more stable. The force is going to be able to transfer more optimally between the upper and lower body. So for example, when I'm running, if I've got a weak core and it's not very strong, and I've got sort of a lot of side to side movement, I'm going to be losing energy when I'm sprinting. So if I've got a nice solid sturdy core, the energy can just keep transferring between upper and lower body. I can preserve that energy and keep putting it into the ground and into my upper body movement as well, which is aiding the speed of that movement. Okay, so that's there in terms of strength. Also, I just wanted to cover with the strength from the ball. The core strength is obviously really important as well to help us remain stable. Everything is a chain, everything is interlinked. So it's no good just training lower body strength. We need to train your core strength and also your upper body strength as well, because that's going to enable you to have that power in the upper body, and that strength to hold someone off at the same time. You could have great strength in your lower body, but if your upper body is lacking, you could still get pushed off the ball. So just making sure that we're creating like a really well-rounded football athlete in terms of the strength training, touching on all bases there. Okay, I've already touched on the increased ability to recover, because the force is going to be spread across a greater number of muscle fibers which are recruited to help with the movement, and the lower impact that the force is going to have. Okay, so just touch on that point again. So this ties into the injury resilience side. So if our tissues, our muscles, ligaments and tendons have a higher tolerance, they're stronger, they can deal with more force, then the forces that they're going to experience out on the pitch are going to be less stressful and cause less potential fatigue and damage to those tissues, which then means that, again, we can recover faster after a match, and then also produce higher levels or maintain a high level of performance week in, week out, because that strength is really helping with not only absorbing that force and being able to cope with it, but also the recovery side as well, in terms of it's not going to reach such a level of fatigue because it's already conditioned for a high level to be able to deal with a higher level of force. Okay, and the final one there, better transfer of force. I think I've already covered that in some of my other points. Okay, so really the key things there in terms of strength training is there's the injury resilience side first and foremost, but also the actual direct improvements that it can have and benefits to actual football performance in terms of limb movement, speed of movement when we're running, decelerating, changing direction, power when we're going up for our headers, holding off players, our ability to recover between sprints. It's going to improve our stamina levels as well, because we're going to be able to, we're going to become slightly less fatigued with every movement that we perform throughout the game. So all of these things come together. And obviously, like I said at the start, strength training doesn't automatically mean increasing muscle bulk and muscle size. During the season, unless a player is injured, it might be a good situation to do that and just focus on some more muscle hypertrophy work if a player might be injured, just to reduce any muscle loss in size that they might experience. But outside of that, we're not going to be training the way which is for increasing muscle size. We're going to be looking at preserving strength levels, optimizing strength levels. If we're, when we're working to increase strength, we're using a variety of different rep ranges, but also we're not going to be working to failure as well. And we can also combine that with other exercises at the same time. So we've got our core work in there, we've got our balance work in there as well, mobility, flexibility. All these things are going to help tap into what we've already got inside us, look for improvements where we possibly can around that in terms of increasing strength levels. And then in the off season, that's when you can go even harder in terms of creating extra muscle soreness, which can trigger that increase in muscle size and the benefits that can come from that. One final thing actually to mention as well is that muscle hypertrophy can actually occur from over time, over a greater period of time, from, say, you're just doing powerful movements like plyometrics. If you perform those, week after week consistently, those movements will eventually lead to some muscle hypertrophy, and there's an argument that it'll actually be a more functional level, a more functional way of having muscle hypertrophy occur, because it's specific to those powerful movements. So my approach is we want to get that type of muscle hypertrophy, which is highly specific, and we get that from the power-based exercises that we can do during the season, alongside the strength-based exercises where we're not working to failure. Get that benefit during the season, and then that's not going to slow us down in the slightest. There's no risk of that. And then at the same time, in the off season, we can work on increasing the muscle size a bit further. But again, even in the off season, time is very limited, so it's never going to get to the point where a player is just going to become noticeably really big if they're training in the right way. The only way I can see this really happening is a player who started doing their own gym-based stuff during the week, multiple times per week, and they're literally just training to be a bodybuilder, and they're fueling themselves around that as well. And then you might start to notice feeling a bit bulky, a bit heavy on the pitch. But if we're doing this properly, it's really not going to happen. Also with, sorry, I keep doing additional points here, but I just keep thinking of things that pop into my head. You'll probably notice professional players, adult players, when they come back at the start of the season, they often look like bulkier. Their shirts looking tighter around their arms. And when they come back and they're starting the season, that's because they've been able to do that more hypertrophy-based focused work in that off-season period. So they can dedicate more time to that. But then what you'll notice is that as the season sort of progresses throughout the months, they start to slim down a little bit. So their level of strength and explosiveness is not decreasing, but because of the natural slimming effect of playing football, and like I mentioned, the challenges of getting enough calories in, and the type of training that we can do in terms of strength training, that's going to have a natural slimming effect on them anyway. But they've built that new size and strength in the off season, and then if they sort of slim down slightly as the season progresses, they're still going to be able to maintain that strength and power, those strength and power levels. And then it's sort of a cycle. So every time you essentially miss an off-season period, you're missing the opportunity to train on that type of training with the muscle hypertrophy and get the benefits from that, which is already a limited window in the off-season in itself. And you're literally missing an opportunity to then do that for another full year. Then you might miss that time again, and you're going to miss that whole part of the strength curve, the type of strength training which does have some benefits to football athleticism. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. If you're interested in learning more about this, I've written a book called the Football Fitness Bible. If you haven't got that already, I've added a link below this video where you can grab the ebook version, and also there'll be a link in there where you can grab the physical copy on Amazon as well. It's available in paperback and hardback. If you would like help with implementing all of this type of strength training, if you're a parent of a youth footballer and you want to start implementing this for your son or your daughter, you understand the benefits, and you want someone who understands what they're doing and is very experienced in this to help guide you and make it tailored to your child. And then we also provide that service as well. That's called the Elite Football Athlete Program. It's run fully online, and you'll find more details in the link I've added below this video as well. So if you've got any questions or comments at all, or if you think I've left anything out, I'd love to hear them below this video. And thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.